Jerry, what do you think what has the pandemic done to how companies raise money and how investors now are seeking deals and looking at deals?
I think for many people, it stopped the process in its tracks. That investors feel that without the personal meetings, they they just don't have a good enough feel about the whether or not the team that is being put together is quite right. And I think that they just feel like they don't have the full amount of information anymore. And so it's really slowed investment in companies unless people previously knew each other.
Right. And the lack of in-person meetings, I think they had a lot of value because you could really articulate, you could go back and forth with questions and answers. So how important do you think it is now that when you are sending over information or documents on a potential investment, that it is done in a more methodical way?
I think that there's a that when I think that people, when they're in person, have a checklist in their mind of the things they need to cover, and that they're also over multiple meetings, they get a feeling about this. But when you're trying to do this without personal meetings, you need to have a really systematic and complete set of a program or list that you would use to communicate, so that you could check all the boxes to make the investors feel comfortable.
Right. It seems that one of the most important components of the main stage is the ability to provide companies, organizations a platform to tell their story, to showcase their brand. And now this is something you're familiar with,
Yeah.
but how important is it for a company at an early stage to really have a concise story and let folks know their brand?
I think investors choose companies based upon the ideas and then their belief that the founders have the vision and the energy and the just the drive to make it happen. I think without a good idea, then there's nothing. There's no reason to continue. But I think it's that combination. And I think that the main stage gives a person exploring a potential investment a place to really learn a lot about the company. They can learn about the story of how they came together, what the idea is or ideas are. They can have a discussion about the size of the market and the size of the opportunity. And the great thing about the main stage is by being all in one place, you can explore different parts. You can come back and explore at a greater depth if you hadn't had a time in a single sitting to go through it. Previously to this, much of this happened perhaps with a business plan and a pitch deck, but then fleshed out in personal conversations and meetings. And then there was a look at what the paperwork looked like and whether it felt like it was a fair investment to both sides. I think investments where it's the right balance between the investors and the company are the right ones and the ones that are most successful. It's often the case, and I know this from music contracts, that if you feel that you're working for too little or you're being taken advantage of, it may stop you from having the drive to do the best job or to complete it. And so where you feel that a balance has been, the proper balance is there, motivates both sides, and both sides are the winner.
Yeah, and I know with you not only being a co-founder of the main stage, you've begun to use the software yourself for another project you're involved in. Has the experience taught you anything about that other company? Has it begun to make you think a little bit about how you're presenting the material as you were uploading it into the software of the main stage?
Yes, I think that the other company had really relied upon personal relationships. The story of that company and uh, the goal of that company is very defined and very, it really drives the investment the most. But what I've understood is how there is so many papers and so much information that if you wanted to explore it more, even though I've been very involved with that company, there's things that I had never seen before when I systematically started uploading it. Also, there's a number of new employees in that company who I've been on the phone with, but I never read their bio or looking at their picture. One of the members, it's a picture of her with a rocket launcher in Iraq. And I knew that she was with the military, but I hadn't seen that. And it just makes you go, oh, this person, a little, reading the bios and just paying more attention. I think that the entire goal of the main stage is how do we create something that draws the attention of the viewer and keeps their attention. It's a little bit like, why is one movie or a TV show successful? The story, the actors, they all pull you in and you want to keep watching, you want to keep exploring, you want to keep looking. But when it's an investment, that's what you want to do. You want to create that place that a prospective investor can come and explore and feel that there's enough information there that he can get to know the founders, he can get to know the ideas that are propelling the company forward. And then if that investor ever gets the advantage, has a Zoom meeting with them or eventually a live meeting, they're coming in with so much more of those questions already answered. And they can therefore, at a much more efficient time, get to the point of perhaps pulling the trigger and making the investment.
Right. To that point, you've been on the other end of these deals, looking at companies in the private space as a potential investor. What are some of the challenges that investors have when looking at a private investment opportunity? Often it's you're reviewing maybe the financials, but certainly an investor pitch deck, and they can range anywhere from
Right.
10 to 30 pages. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of being an investor on that side? And then how does the main stage support some of these challenges that investors have and make it a different experience for investors?
Well, one of the things when you asked that question that just jumped out is my frustration with a couple of investments that there's an occasional call and an occasional communication from the companies, but I really don't have a way to really know always what's going on. And if it's someone that you already know, you'll call them up and talk to them on the phone or something like that. And you have a rapport with them, so therefore you can get to the bottom of it. But I've invested in things where I didn't really know. I just thought it was a really great idea. I was introduced by a friend and it seemed like a good investment. But I feel frustrated that I'm not getting regular updates. And I think that one of the great things about the main stage is it allows this tool for regular updates from the company and sort of pushes the company to make those updates. When you have a quick, something official like a yearly or a quarterly report, that's something that you think a lot about and are very, very essential. But sometimes there's new press, there was an interview, there was an article that one of the founders or the team of the company has written. And so by creating a centralized place for those communications to update people about the progress of the company, new hires, change. Startups are about change. Having been through a number of startups, sometimes every month is different. Then you start to sometimes settle into things that are like a 6-month period where something is being done and is not that different. But I think that involved and an investor that feels up to date with the company is going to feel the most comfortable with their investment, but is also going to feel the most comfortable if it ever gets to the point that there's a need for more money, or is ever a point where an introduction is required. So I think it helps create the communications between the investors and the group that is the company.
Right. And you talk about new content, whether that's an article, a podcast, or an interview. And the way we've seen it in the past is maybe that interview gets put up on LinkedIn, maybe it gets emailed to investors. Have you ever experienced being able to go to one place like the main stage where that constant communication is happening, where there's always going to be new uploads? Or let's say you've missed quarterly reports and you need to go and figure out where they are. How does that change the whole communication process by having a software that provides communications throughout the duration of the company, well after the investment's been made?
I think it creates an expectation of regular updates, which will be a very positive thing because it's so easy to do an update for the team that is the company, that they will just be thinking about it, you might say, on a monthly basis rather than on a fixed schedule of like once a year or something like that. And so it just means that you're going to and I think that more constant contact will create a more unified purpose between the investors and the company.
Yeah, I agree. I think in the past, we've seen a little bit of loyalty from investors when they feel like they're in an investment where they're constantly getting updates, being told what is with the company, versus I only hear from you when when you need money, and
Right.
at some point that dries up.
Yes, I think that especially in a day where you have lots of investors, I've been in companies where there's really a venture fund and the angel group, and it's a fairly small group. So therefore, the board of directors meetings where they were either were a board member or they certainly had the right visitation rights, provided enough updates for them to feel that they were on top of things. And I think that's still, when you have a large investor, you're still going to have that communication. But as companies have looked to larger groups, crowdfunding has been part of this, but are looking sometimes to larger groups of investors. When it's 20 investors and not 2, there isn't a similar structure for keeping them up to date. And I think that the main stage creates that.
You talk a lot about communicating with current investors. That borderlines also staying compliant. Can you talk a little bit about compliance with the main stage, and how does the main stage assist in keeping a company compliant? I know you touched on that a little bit, but can you give us some more details on?
I think that compliance is one of the, well, it's sort of it's an added benefit to the main stage, and yet for some people it might be the most important thing. And I think that people, that if that was the only thing we did, that might even be a reason that certain people would sign up. There is an issue that if there's ever a change in deal terms, that anyone who's ever gotten the information about the deal must be informed of the changes. And this can be a really burdensome task for companies. They have to keep track of all the emails they sent things to, or write down the people that they had a meeting in person with, particularly for companies that are doing a raise that might last over a year or something like that. They just may lose track. And very often a young company will have terms of a deal, but if someone comes in, say a venture capitalist or an angel or a more well-heeled investor who says, I'm fine with this, and in fact, I'm going to take the rest of a round, or I'm going to expand the round because I think you need more money than you've asked for. They may ask for a slightly better deal than happened at first. And so you need to update the people who have already invested in the company, but you also need to update anyone else who had been given the information. Because the main stage creates a centralized location where we have the email addresses of everyone who is being presented to, and who then the software watches any updates that you are doing to your site on the main stage, and will basically warn you as the company that you have made a change that requires reaching out to every person who has ever been contacted. And then with the single push of a button, they are alerted that there is a change. And that shifts the burden to much more towards the investor than leaving it all on the company, because a notice was sent to them that they need to come back to where they check in on the company anyway. So it means also that it's much simpler. You don't have to go find the email, send whatever tool, whatever the new tools you are using to communicate the terms of the deal, or ideas about the product, anything that you think is really essential to the deal. And the unfortunate thing is that companies that have ignored this, sometimes FINRA can come in and say that they had not contacted people, and the entire deal can be unwound, and all the money must be given back, which could just destroy the company. So this is a really a big issue. And people, attorneys warn you of things like this, but in in the moment of the day when you're doing things, certain things get lost. I mean, people try to make sure that they remember everything for their taxes and write it down, but sometimes a receipt gets lost or things like that. Tools that make these tasks where you really need to keep track of things are really useful. And one of the things that websites and apps on phones and computers themselves are trying to solve, the main stage really solves so many of these problems for a company raising money.
I've heard you in past interviews talk and give advice to early stage companies about spending money wisely, but also to hire good attorneys and good accountants. But it can often be a catch-22 when a startup or an early stage company is trying to raise funds to be able to afford high-level service.
Yes.
You see the main stage and the software of what it provides potentially preventing a company from needing a service of an attorney down the road compared to what they might be able to prevent by using a software like the main stage when it comes to anything legal in the business? Is there anything that the main stage can do?
Well, the thing that we were just talking about, that for the cost of a few hours on the phone with your attorney, you could pay for the main stage for a year and keep yourself compliant. So if there ever was some communication with FINRA, then am I right that it's FINRA or is it the SEC?
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
In some,
So if there was any communication, so if there was ever, what we were just talking about, if there was ever a communication from FINRA or the SEC to you as a company, you would need to, I'll start that again when Dylan's not watching us. if if there was ever a communication to a company from FINRA or the SEC, you would immediately need to reach out to your attorney, who might not even be the right attorney, and you'd have to find a securities attorney. And that's an expensive process. Easily can be $10,000. And so the the fact of keeping you within compliance in this automatic way really could save the company. So that's the first thing. But also the being able to have all your documents there, and also someone being able to communicate back to the company that they have a question about something, about a document and stuff like that. It just means that there are tools for communicating between the company and the investor in a centralized and simple location. In some ways, the main stage site is sort of a specialized website for your investors. Many companies create a website that then they just don't have the money or the time, even if they have the ability to do it, that they don't keep it fresh, they don't keep it up to date. And they spend a lot of money on it in the beginning, and then it just looks stale, it is out of date later. The sort of continuous interaction with the main stage and where you are presenting information to your investors means that a company is motivated to always keep it up to date, to always keep the information there, to keep information flowing so that either people who have invested in the company or prospective investors are seeing that there is, if they're taking a little bit of time to make their decision, that they see that there's new information being added and that it's a vibrant space and something that they should be involved with.
prior to the main stage and now being able to look at an investment opportunity in this format, how do you currently get presented investment opportunities? How do you look at those? And then how does a VC look at investment opportunities today? And how do you see the main stage experience changing how you'll look at a company? And more importantly, VCs and investment banks when it comes to diligence and reviewing a investment opportunity?
Well, it is my belief that the main stage has the ability to become a standardized tool that is used sort of throughout the investment industry because it so simplifies many of the tasks of that companies go through, even companies that are quite mature. It also allows VCs, angels, even family offices, people, even potentially a person who has multiple investments, if they're to have a dashboard to be able to look at the progress that companies are making as they try to raise money without interrupting the company by having a call or scheduling or even an email exchange. I mean, one of the most challenging things for any founder of a company is that raising money is a full-time job, and that a full-time job raising money means that you're not doing the job of building the company. And so you're being pulled in both directions. And this, by taking some of that scheduling away and making a very simplified uh, application for communication, the main stage makes it easier for the founders to keep working on their on the growth of the company and the development of the idea while raising money at the same time.
As an angel investor, how do you currently look at investment opportunities? How are they presented to you? What are some of the challenges and frustrations over the years that you may have had?
Well, I find that every company is sort of different, and you come to them from different places. Sometimes you come in because someone who you feel is an experienced investor who you're friends with have invited you to join them, and you sort of trust their uh, um, you might say guidance on that particular investment. But I had an example of that where I invested in a company, but the company then got acquired, and so I had the conversation with the person who brought me in. So I had an experience where I was someone had recommended an investment to me, and there was a whole group that were going in, and this one of the people who introduced it to me was a former VC who has a lot of experience. That company that we invested in then uh, had some problems, and there were conversations, but at a certain point, I felt like I didn't always have. I had to track down information to know what was going on or whether I should. Eventually, the company got bought by another company, and I wasn't quite really in the loop, know everything. And so I'm not sure that the main stage would have solved every problem in that case, but it would have, again, because I could have sort of kept up to date with it, I think it would have been much better. I think every time I've made an investment is because I got excited about an idea, and usually it was someone I knew that was making the introduction. But I've been sorely disappointed and wrong about many of the investments because sometimes I had no idea that how the money would be handled, and I couldn't keep track of it. Companies were in a different state. I was part of a green venture fund, which invested in companies that were in Europe and Australia. And even though we had a monthly board call with them, there was a sense that we couldn't keep on. You'd come back a month later and they hadn't done what had been asked. The changes weren't made, and it just, again, this is the big issue with early stage investments is feeling confident that the advice that is given is taken, and that and also that money is not being wasted. Because in the talking about this green venture fund, there were estimates of how long it would take to develop some machinery, and then a year later, it appeared that the amount of time it was going to finish that project was actually longer than what it had been the year earlier. Some of that may have been about learning about stuff, but I have a feeling that some of it was uh, wishful thinking, you might say, on the founder. And by not being able to kind of check in on it, in that case, directly, even though we had a monthly call, it still kind of felt like out of control.
You talking about the main stage as a way to tell a story in using images and videos, very much like a website, but then also there's a compliance component, there's a communication component, there's a way to interact with potential and current investors. But can you tell me more about what makes the main stage different, say, from a file share or a data vault? Because it sounds like you still upload documents to the main stage.
Well, a data vault, the main stage includes what a data vault has. It's the main stage creates a combination of a sort of personalized website that with for your investors that is pre-formatted, so you don't have to hire someone to do it. You just put in the information, and it's put in a consistent and attractive format for communicating with your investors. Along with that is what data vaults usually do, which are show the paperwork that an investor, either what they have to sign, the articles of incorporation for the company. It shows something that you might be sent a link to see something on YouTube. There's the ability to see films that have been made by the company to tell their story, but it might be also other kinds of media, whether it's articles that were written, press that has been created, or other films or videos that were shot that help tell the story. And it's a content relationship manager, or a CRM, that keeps track of your communications with each investor and their communications back to you, and keeps everything organized so that the administrator of the main stage site's job is not so overwhelming, and so that they can handle it and do what other things they need to do at the company.
Jerry, I know it's early for the main stage, but what have been some of the things you've heard from feedback, say from VCs, investment banks, angel groups, when they've seen the main stage?
I think the biggest thing I've seen from VCs and angel groups is that they go, this seems to answer a need that we have, or we built a tool, but it doesn't do it as well as this. Is keeping track of what's going on with our companies is our hardest and biggest job. It's one of the reasons that VCs will make fewer investments, because money is not the issue. The issue is the partner's time to stay on top of the deal. And so this creates a tool to help stay on top of the company and keep those communications simple. And just the concept that there is a dashboard where you can check into progress about money being raised and how much activity has been on the site allows a VC, a angel group, the sort of manager of a family office, to very quickly look in on the investments once a week or even more often, and to say, things look like they're developing pretty fine. I think I can leave that alone. Or to say, I need to reach out. We need to have a conversation. Something's not happening here. All the other investments are growing. I need to have an answer to this question. And that just doesn't happen now. There's no simple way to do that. And the ways to do it are now cumbersome and time consuming for the companies, and are taking their time away. So by creating this, you might say, software application that creates an organized way for communication to be shown, to be updated, and to be shown to investors, just simplifies and makes that process much more compelling and more complete.
So Jerry, going back to this whole branding concept and being able to tell your story, create an image, create profiles using videos and banner images that we've seen in the main stage, and more videos and pitch decks. You're somebody who has spent a lot of time in your career building brands and images. How important is that to convey to investors, but maybe even strategic partners in the early days of a company?
I think one of the things that the main stage experience does is, I think it's just pleasing for an investor to come to explore whether or not this is something they want to keep exploring and then to perhaps invest in. I think that in the past, you get information like a pitch deck or a business plan, and then, a bunch of emails about different things, and you can handle it. But with the main stage, you can, because it's a sort of live web app that you can keep coming back to, is you can explore on your own time the different aspects of the company. So in a company that has, for instance, many employees, you might read about the founders and perhaps a couple of the other uh, most important people there, but it tells you something about the company to see who the other employees are as well, because you'll see a sense of good leadership if you believe that all the way down through the, we'll say, more junior members of a company, that they have hired quality people. And people have time constraints in everything they do in their life. So if you're looking into something, you may read things, but very often a phone call comes and you're interrupted. And then if you're coming back to something that's, you might say, a stack of stuff to read through, you can do it. And you're spending money on it, so you're going to take it seriously. But I think it's one of the reasons that people very often feel that they need to have someone who, this is all they do, is to look at investments, because A, it's time consuming, and also B, there's something about the knowledge that those people have. People that have gotten to the point of being angel investors are excited by looking at companies, but a lot of that is about going to the sort of monthly or quarterly meetings where companies come and pitch to them, and then it's sort of organized that way. Otherwise, their days are very often caught up in running their own companies or doing their own things. Having this, you might say, sort of site that is sort of alive with the information, that tells the story, that gives you all the data about your investment, tells you about the financials of the company, what the money is going to be spent on, the plans for the company, how the company is intending to grow, the market that it can do, having sometimes testimonials or films of relevant people to the company so you can get to know them in a time where personal meetings are out the window. The more complete that can be, and the more it can be updated and be a growing and continuous experience, the easier it's going to be to feel that you've gotten to know and to the investment, the potential of the company, and to be able to perhaps pull the trigger and actually spend the money. I think that if you have a stack of videos to go through, pitch decks to look at, documents to read, sometimes you go like, I can't make up my mind on that. I just don't know enough. And again, I think that that's where the meeting is, where those things get pulled in, and sometimes people get to the point like, okay, I'm pulling the trigger on this. As well as sometimes you see that an idea is hot because you know that your friends are investing it and things like that. The main stage, because it shows the progress of the investment and people coming in, you'll see that that the idea is resonating. It's not that they're just, and it's something that is, is the same thing that is seen by everybody.